Hey guys, this is Kay. Today let's take a quick look at the Gamesir X2 controller. To this day, the Gamesir X2 remains one of my most recommended controllers to the community. The audio in this next part has been turned up so you can hear a little bit more of what the buttons sound like. As you can hear, the buttons have a very clicky, tactile feel to them. Now the controller layout itself is pretty standard. In the bottom right corner you have a home button here. Bottom left corner you got your screenshot button, which is kind of helpful. Top right you have your start button, and top left you have the select button. Now the USB Type-C port does angle if you want to stick it in that way. I find it's a lot easier to put the top in first, stretch it out, then line up the bottom. The bottom of the controller supports a Type-C charging port. Do not put anything over 30 watts into it because it will break the charging functionality. Now the one thing I do not like about this device would be these triggers. They are extremely clicky. I do not find myself using them a lot, but when I do use them, you will hear it. The closest thing I can relate them to would be a mouse click, so that might bother some people, it might not bother others. The back grips are this soft rubber, which does feel pretty good in your hand, and it's quite comfortable to hold. All in all, the back part of this controller is quite comfortable. We'll add a quick note about this rubber part in the middle. It does collect a lot of dust. Now these joystick covers do come off. It does come with a couple replacements. You can also use these without the joystick covers on top. Some people like the smaller joysticks. I find I want to have it very similar to a Switch, so I usually leave these on. They do take a second to get on, just push them on and they do go pop right back on there. Now these joysticks do come pretty close to the controller when you have them pressed down, but they do not actually hit the controller themselves. All in all, it's a very comfortable controller to use. Now switching over to an emulator like Retroarch, you'll find this actually automatically loads the controller profile. You can actually go down here to your port 1 controls. You will see it does show Gamesir X2 already. If you're unsure about any of the controls, you can actually just go back and just reassign them to make sure they're all set correctly. In my case, I don't actually have to do this as they were automatically set correctly. But if you feel like any of these might be set wrong, you can just go back, double check, and then save your controller config after. Now, even though I haven't changed anything, I'm still going to go down to my configuration and I'm just going to make sure it saves the profile for the controller itself. Now that we've saved it, let's head over and let's try loading a game and see how the controls work. Now for a game, I'll probably just pick something simple. Let's pick Genesis, maybe Streets of Rage. Now loading up Streets of Rage here. Let's take a look and make sure the controllers work. As you can see, the joystick works fine. D-pad also works. And the buttons seem to be working flawlessly. Now the other thing you'll note is as I'm moving around, as soon as I click on something, it is nearly instant. I am not noticing any input lag whatsoever when using this controller. Now even a Bluetooth controller in this situation would work fine. This is one case where you don't exactly need perfect input latency, but it does help quite a bit. For the next test, let's try a quicker game and see how having no input latency can help. Now, Sonic Adventure 2 for the Dreamcast is one game where I've always found Bluetooth controllers struggle at. Going down this hill quick, making these sharp turns, you will notice with a Bluetooth controller you're hitting a lot more of the turns rather than actually being able to turn sharp. You're also missing a lot of these jumps as well. Even with a good Bluetooth controller, something like the DualShock 4, I'm still struggling to hit these jumps, whereas with the Gamesir X2, it's quite easy to do. Now, I'm not sure why, but this controller specifically has been clicking with me. It almost feels like I would say playing on a Switch, just the way the control schemes are laid out, the joysticks themselves and the buttons, they all feel very similar in size to a Switch. Now, while not being the biggest advocate of the Nintendo Switch in general in the community, I did enjoy the controllers. The only thing I did not like about the controllers was how they wobbled. They weren't fully attached to the body, which means moving them a little bit could cause them to wobble. And having the controllers themselves wobble while playing it wasn't always the most immersive experience. Whereas something like this, having the back actually hold the controls themselves and not having them removable, makes for a more solid gameplay experience. Now, this device itself is actually slightly wider than a Switch. It is a little shorter, so it's more of like a Switch Lite, but just a longer Switch Lite. As you can see, Dreamcast is not posing any issue to this controller with input latency. Next, let's take a look at something a little bit more faster paced. We'll load up Doom via Moonlight, and let's see what it's like playing Doom. Right, so with Doom loaded up here in Moonlight, I have it set to 1440p, 50 megabytes per second, and HEVC is turned on for this test. Now, streaming from the computer itself also adds the additional input latency that you would receive from the network and hardware encoding. For this test, I'm using a Xiaomi Mi 9T with a Snapdragon 730. It is averaging about 15 to 20 milliseconds hardware encoding latency, and over the AC Wi-Fi it has, it's giving me about 3 to 6 milliseconds input latency. Even with the additional hardware and network encoding latency I'm receiving, this controller is giving me no issues at all streaming games from my PC natively. Now, being in Canada, I did pay a little bit more of a premium for this. It normally goes for about $89.99 on Amazon here. I did pay about $82, and that was from Banggood. Took me about 2 weeks to get it, but as you can see, I've been pretty happy with it. And all in all, it's a great controller. Even playing something like this using the trigger, I'm not bothered by that clicky sound either that I mentioned earlier. Now, if someone in the community asks me for a high-end handheld, this is always going to be my recommendation, is to just build your own with a controller with something like this. But yeah, if you're in the market for a new handheld and you don't want to wait, just build your own. Grab a controller, find a phone, put them together, and you got a great little device that can do quite a lot of different things. Now, most people already have a phone sitting around. Sometimes people will have an extra phone. I do recommend actually setting this up on your extra phone rather than your primary phone. You're going to find you have a lot less distractions playing on a gaming phone specifically for games rather than on your daily driver. Now, in the description, I'll link a page that helps you look around for product pricing. If you are in the States, you are probably better off getting it from Amazon. If you're in Canada or another country, you can check out this website. They do compare prices and try to give you the best price across Ali, GearBest, Banggood. That's just kind of what I've been ordering from, but it's totally up to you. Give it a check. If you feel like waiting, order from Banggood maybe, if you can save maybe 10, 15 bucks. But if you do want it right away, go ahead, order it from Amazon. They're pretty good at getting there, and I've known quite a few people to get them off Amazon directly as well. Now, of course, all the links in the description are non-affiliate links. I'll just link that page for comparing prices if you want to grab one of these. But all in all, I've been very happy with it. I can't complain. As long as you can get away with those clicky triggers, if they don't bother you, that's the only thing I really don't like about this device. It's not a make or break situation. It doesn't bother me personally, but I can see how that would bother a couple people. As always, thanks for watching and happy retro gaming.